Greetings, Dragon Ball fans, and welcome to part 4 of What If Kami Had Kids, where the Guardian of Earth took a page from his evil half's playbook and started his own colony of Namekians. Previously, Kami had hatched a few eggs, and the warrior clan duo, Fujin and Reijin, were born. When he had recovered from that life-shortening exertion, the dragon clanmates, Sujin and Ryujin, were created as well. The pair of rapidly maturing Piccolo lookalikes initially shocked the nascent Z-Fighters at Kame House, before being shocked themselves by the arrival of Raditz. Lacking some of the more potent techniques of Goku and Piccolo, they were not able to save their father's previous protege, but they were able to take his son's training away from their brooding sibling from another source, and things were slightly better for it. Gohan was given access to not just them, but Kami, the Lookout, and the other Z-Fighters, who all had their own vaguely unique skills that the boy soaked up like a sponge. The Z-Fighters themselves also benefited from these additional training partners, the reluctant Piccolo included, with Chaozu being the only casualty to Vegeta and Nappa when they arrived. Once on Namek, the trio de Ver, along with Krillin and the stowaway Gohan, met Mori and his village, then made their way to Guru, who was tickled pink, or at least a brighter shade of green, to see the descendants of Katas doing so well for themselves, despite the circumstance of their reunion. Even Piccolo had somehow overcome his worryingly evil nature. Being surrounded by Fujin, Reijin, little Sujin, Ryujin, and of course Gohan had done him a world of good. Guru sealed the deal with the gift of 13 Namekian centuries of memories, a pot sweetened by the promise of knowledge and techniques, along with the minutiae of daily life, was handed to Piccolo on a silver platter. Unfortunately, their attempt to wish Frieza away from Namek didn't work, and with Kami not to hand, or willing to risk Earth's Dragon Balls, Piccolo could not become the ultimate Super Namekian. However, after a brief bout of rock-paper-scissors, Fujin and Reijin, with the guidance of their other brother, underwent the fusion instead, and both having had their individual potentials unlocked, proved too much for Frieza, despite him managing to achieve his second form. Honestly, they could probably have tanked the initial stages of his final form, but the usual cockiness that accompanies such a power-up was missing. Reijin had effectively just lost his brother, his best friend in all the universe. He was not in the mood to play. When all was said and done, they tried to get Porunga to separate them, but in order to maintain existing lore, where Namekian fusion is, for whatever reason, forbidden, this iteration of Porunga cannot diffuse them. Presumably Mori will solve that issue by the time Kibito is a thing, post-Majin Buu. Porunga was not completely useless, however. Aside from restoring Chaozu's body, and then reviving him, when asked by Gohan about fission, he had several suggestions. First off, multiform, which, it's worth noting, would result in 2 people at a higher overall potential than the fusees, being divided by 2, not by 10, or whatever the Namekian fusion usually comes with. They could also ask a different dragon, perhaps, that has different powers, though it's doubtful that Kami made Shenron with this kind of thing in mind. Finally, there were the natives of the planet Yardrat. The confusion over where they could find that planet was short-lived, as the bound but sole-surviving Jace was willing to trade his freedom to these fools for the location. Once on Yardrat, they passed Pibara's test with flying colors. Well, all but Vegeta, being too caught up in his own pride. Being outclassed by literally everyone here was just too much to take. Even Kakarot, who had barely landed only to up and leave again, having gained little in the way of Zenkais from the likes of Ginyu, he was the least of it. They had plenty to do on their trip to Yardrat, too. Goku was as eager to show them all the gravity training as he was chomping at the bit to test himself against this somewhat downcast behemoth, Reijin. There was always someone stronger, right? And this guy? Wowza, this fusion thing is intense. While Vegeta continues to train relentlessly on the ship, somewhere in the 100G and higher ranges, the rest are busy sitting atop their poles, bringing their spirits under control. Your average TV-level smart kid Gohan would have been making the best progress under the guidance of one of Pibara's clones, if not for Reijin's single-minded determination to see his brother again, instead of only vaguely feeling him and remembering him within. Krillin and Goku then bring up the rear, the latter of which can only marvel at how quickly his son is adapting to things. Maybe there actually was something to Chi-Chi's insistence on studying all the time. When Goku receives word from King Kai that some other big bad is once again heading Namek's way, he is still a while away from completing even the basic training. Raijin's pursuit of forced spirit fission has allowed them to separate themselves, but Fujin had to start his training from scratch, since all that knowledge was kept by the host. A small group of them that are ready and willing to head off are Raijin, Piccolo, Gohan, and to the mixed feelings of everyone else in the group, Vegeta. When asked why he wants to go, the former Prince of the Saiyans keeps his own counsel, and while he's not a fan of the whole shoulder-grab method of travel, if he took the spaceship, well, he'd probably miss out on his chance, so he allows Piccolo and Gohan to make physical contact, and the four of them vanish from Yardrat. Appearing back on Namek at what is by now Mori's tower, they nod to Nail before looking up to see King Cold and his forces spreading out throughout the upper atmosphere. Without even a word, Vegeta powers up and blasts off to meet the incoming throng of fodder soldiers with wanton abandon. Gohan shares a glance with Raijin and Piccolo, then follows suit, and while he doesn't strike to kill, he still works his way through his fair share. It's not actually that hard when there's 4 of him, after all. Raijin and Piccolo look on approvingly. They've only managed 1 clone each so far, and here's Gohan, fielding 3 with ease. When it's down to King Cold, no one is overly surprised to find the orange-skinned Jace in tow. His current state, though, does give them pause. Well, everyone but Vegeta, who knew enough about King Cold to know how he treats his men, and worse, their failures. Jace is alive, sure, but he's clearly seen better days, and the chains that bind him do not look comfortable. His armor is in shreds, his beautiful Space Australian face is bruised and scraped, and his locks are anything but luscious. He is also, quite literally, in tow, with a rusty metal collar around his neck and arms leading back to King Cold's hands. Vegeta smirks at the Orange Man before turning his attention to Cold. He'd known exactly where Jace would go running, and had been hoping to see just how well that went for the apparent deserter. While Vegeta's initial strike is enough to shock King Cold into letting go of Jace's chain, it is not enough to do more than annoy the oversized icicle. Vegeta's just not quite there yet, and Cold is happy to show him just how wide that gulf truly is. Said gap does not go unnoticed by Piccolo and Raijin, however, and after letting the Saiyan have his fun, with him now in a heap at their feet, they share a glance before shrugging. Nail, who is also in attendance along with the few other prominent Namekians, all gasp in shock as these two casually start doing rock-paper-scissors. That is until Gohan reminds them that Piccolo maybe shouldn't be taking a back seat for, reasons. After the flash, King Cold rolls his eyes and starts to comment about how utterly unimpressive this all is. Expecting those middling results those ancient and now extinct Metamorans had been catalogued to show, he goes to tap his scouter. Still, a race that confuse is just bad for business. Sure, it may start small, but his ancestors had wiped the Metamorans out for the same reason his son had decided to take out the Saiyans. It's just not worth the risk, is it? Well, he tries to tap his scouter, but having sensed a power level as high as this in the immediate vicinity, it had activated all on its own. Then promptly exploded when the energy sampling inductance coils started sucking down the rather impressive number of electron volts flowing through the air, thus blowing the usually impressive capacitors. Man, they really need to work on their overcurrent protection. Not even Mecha Cooler, rebuilt numerous times by the electronic monstrosity that was the Big Getty Star, could come up with a good one. A simple fuse, for example, or maybe, and bear with me here, a circuit breaker. King Cold, unfortunately, was not paying attention, so didn't notice the number that flickered on the screen moments before the entire assembly popped. Vegeta, however, has come back around just in time to hear Cold's little revelation about Frieza and Planet Vegeta. This is, of course, the first he's heard of it, having never bumped into Dodoria, or even encountering Frieza directly on his first trip to Namek. He makes a good showing, but promptly gets a bit too much sense knocked into him by the back of King Cold's hand, so biting back the tears after decades of pent-up rage and regret at the loss of his planet and throne, he looks over at the recently upgraded Piccolo, and with a strange expression on his face, and in a somewhat strangled voice, he says simply that if he could please kill that man, Vegeta would, well, he would owe him. The last of the Saiyans would owe him. Piccolo smiles at Vegeta, then looks away as they all feel a shift in King Cold. Apparently, Vegeta's recent rage-fueled punch had given Cold cause for concern, because they can all now see that he has discarded his second, most comfortable form for his own version of their race's supposed final form. Vegeta shrinks back slightly, but Piccolo smiles. He has Raijin's memories after all, and King Cold, it seems, even in this form, is not quite up to Frieza's scratch. The slightly more compact King Cold then gets to experience that lacking firsthand as Piccolo's fist slams into his gut. A couple of minutes later, Vegeta is smiling bitterly down at the beaten and bloodied face of Cold as the life fades from his eyes, and the ex-Frieza Force soldiers that Gohan had so generously spared are bidding a hasty retreat, the ships fading out in the upper atmosphere as they head off. Nail is the first of the locals to approach Piccolo, post-defrosting, and while he is happy about the whole saving the planet thing, there is something else he is desperate to ask. Piccolo smiles knowingly, and then in a move that is very reminiscent of Marvel's Multiple Man, he punches his own palm and promptly splits in two. Raijin looks around at the growing collection of Namekians, and then over at the remains of King Cold, whose body is doing what his name suggests. Nail, meanwhile, is all smiles, and he steps forward with Dende and Cargo. These two younglings, can they take them to that Yardrat place to learn this technique? Piccolo says that, courtesy of Guru, whose dying remains are still within, he could teach it to them directly, but Mori points out that such a boon should be earned the old-fashioned way. To be able to fuse and defuse at will, well, it could change much in their society. Raijin nods over to the two remaining Gohans, who are trying to convince Vegeta to sit still, while they, or he, rather, tries to heal him, and he says that that's only the beginning. With Cargo's potential also unlocked, courtesy of Piccolo, they depart as rapidly as they arrived, and the assembled Namekians are left whispering in amazement at their vanishing from sight and sense. Back on Yardrat, they head in to introduce the two recruits to, presumably, a Pibara clone. After Cargo and Dende are led away, Pibara turns to look at Vegeta, who's been standing in the background not saying a word, not even his trademark tisk. They lock eyes for a moment, then Pibara shakes his head. Soon, perhaps, but not yet. If he can discard more of his pride, he may yet be trusted with these gifts. After returning to Capsule Corp about a year later, they go their separate ways. Vegeta, of course, still enjoys the gravity deck of the ship, so hangs around, much to the somewhat unfaithful Yamcha's irritation. The five Namekians, Piccolo, Dende, Cargo, Fujin, and Raijin, all head off to the lookout to meet and reunite with Kami, Sujin, and Ryujin. Kami is as thrilled to see his sons again as he is to see these new Namekians. Piccolo, though, throws him for a loop. The guy is utterly changed from when they were last in each other's company. There is still an edge of darkness about him, but it is so contained, balanced. Well, more than balanced, to be honest, clinging to those edges at best. Just what has he been up to? Piccolo just smiles, and after his brothers have finished their reunion with their father, Kami and Piccolo adjourn to some random chamber in the lookout to chat. Chi-Chi is about as thrilled as Kami was to see her Gohan back, and better than ever. When that happiness gives way to worry about how much studying he's missed out on, Goku pipes up to say that that's not true at all. Gohan has been absolutely drowning in knowledge from the Yardratians. He'd actually finished the training parts just before leaving for Namek again, and the rest of the time was spent split between their sages, quite literally. And at least one of his noses was constantly buried in Chi-Chi's favorite thing, books. Gohan looks a bit sheepish, but says that yes, he has been studying. He's really sorry for slipping on board the ship, but he had to help Mr. Tien be reunited with Mr. Chaozu. And wow, the things he'd learned. Not just fighting and techniques, but other stuff. Physics, math, and biology. And the fact that he can now remember what his clones learn. Clones? Chi-Chi stammers, then leaps into Goku's arms as another Gohan comes in the door, with a dinner that Goku would approve of slung over his shoulder. Things carry on for a time of general peace, until Goku's encounter with that old chestnut, the heart virus. While training with only a single clone of himself, he collapses, as you do, clutching his chest, and the clone vanishes as he tries to heal himself. But just as he cannot maintain a clone, he also can't focus enough to heal. Even Gohan, who arrives on scene pretty quickly, is struggling with it, so they call for help. The quintet of Namekians, all of Kami's kids, and Piccolo appear in the room, along with Krillin and his new student, Tien, and we get a nice ring of people around Goku, all doing their healing thing. An hour later, they are all thoroughly worn out, but Goku is back up and sitting on the edge of the bed, poking himself in the chest, searching for any trace of pain. With nothing showing up, most of them breathe a sigh of relief. Everyone except Gohan, whose frown draws the attention of Piccolo. Gohan is worried about what just happened, though, and after considering for a moment, he touches his forehead and vanishes. 10 minutes later, with everyone else having left, Gohan returns with a blood sample kit, and we get the comedy of Gohan chasing Goku around the house, trying to stab him in the arm to get said blood sample. Goku, it seems, is not a fan of being stabbed, but Gohan's argument about how they have no idea what's just happened and that it could happen again eventually gets even Chi-Chi in on the chase. And as they corner him in the kitchen, with Chi-Chi stern-wifing the man, Gohan sneaks in for the jab, and we will bring Part 4 to a close. Yeah, I know that's not how taking a blood sample works, but this is TV land, so, just roll with it, okay? How do you think things will go when the androids, or cyborgs, 17 and 18 show up? Has Goku's Kaioken been tweaked by the Ardratians, just like in my other What If, where Vegeta killed Gohan? When do you think we will see the emergence of the Super Saiyan of legend? Has it yet to even occur to Vegeta, who has been laboring away in the Capsule Corp 1 spaceship? Find out next time on Dragon Ball, What If Kami Had Kids?